Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the United Way. Today we have special guest on, Manchester correspondent Rob Dawson. Rob, first of all, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not too bad. Thanks for coming on. And Tom, how's things?
Good on yourself?
Not too bad. Not too bad. So again, nothing new at Manchester United around this time of year. Well, to everyone in the world, there's still the takeover. I don't know, saga, if you want to say. And looking for Rob Dawson is here to maybe give us a bit of an update or insight. So Rob, if we can maybe start off with the ownership or the takeover. Obviously, the jerseys were released this morning. There was a little bit of a protest in front of outside the mega store. I don't know, will the Glazers still be around by the end of the summer, or I don't know, it's a mad kind of situation at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the golden question at the moment. Are the Glazers still going to be in charge at the start of next season? I mean, ultimately, everyone kind of thought that this would be done and dusted by now, and the fact that it isn't is making fans very nervous and very frustrated, and that's why you've seen a protest outside the megastore this morning, because they just feel that they still have to get their message across to the Glazers that they're not wanted as owners. I mean, in truth, the process has dragged on far too long already. This is a process that started in November with that statement that they were going to explore alternatives, whether that's a sale or accepting minority investment. We were told at one stage that it could all be done and dusted by March. Obviously, that deadline has been and gone. The staff at the club were told that they could expect some clarity on the ownership situation by the end of the season. Again, that deadline has been and gone. Everyone will know that there's been kind of 3 official rounds of bidding. Sheikh Jassim and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the 2 kind of public bidders, have submitted numerous bids. They've done everything. They believe that they've done everything that the Glazers have asked, and that Rain Group, who are running the process, done everything that they've asked as well. And even the bidders now are getting very, very frustrated because they're just in a holding pattern. Really, they're waiting to be told whether they've been successful or not. It's just not a great situation for anyone. It's not a great situation for the bidders. It's not a great situation for the fans or the club itself, because ultimately you've got a club that are trying to make the next step forward, build on a relatively successful season, and any kind of uncertainty at that level of a football club is very dangerous, and it needs to be resolved sooner rather than later. I mean, it should have been resolved already, but it needs to be resolved, as soon as possible, really.
Yeah. I mean, like as I said, the club has been being put for sale since November, you could say. We thought maybe April or February would have been that mark, and then when it's getting to June, where you look at other teams signing players, and not only are we not signing players, the Glazers are still around. I'm sure many Manchester United fans expected us to have new owners by around this stage. And I mean, we know with the Glazers, they were never going to let Manchester United go just like that. But do you just keep delaying and delaying and delaying the takeover? Is it are the Glazers set on wanting 6 billion, or do you just want to, I don't know, have a bit of fun?
Yeah, I don't think it's about having fun particularly. I mean, really, the Glazers, the intentions of the Glazers have never really been clear, even from the start of all this. They will point to that statement in November that said that they were looking at what they called strategic alternatives. Now, that could mean anything. That could mean a full sale. It could mean accepting minority investment. The reason that we're even in this position at all is because ultimately United have got essentially a cash flow problem. They haven't got the money to redevelop the infrastructure of the club, and they haven't got the money that's necessary to redevelop or rebuild Old Trafford. They haven't got the money to do the same at Carrington. The reason that we're here at all is because they know that they need to raise money in some way. So whether they accept minority investment, they'll sell a chunk of the club and accept that investment to redevelop Old Trafford, ultimately is still on the table. The fact that the two takeover bids from Sheikh Jassim and Sir Jim Ratcliffe have been made public, naturally creates a lot of attention because everyone knows that they're interested. Everyone knows that they want to take over. For the first time since 2005, Man United fans are faced with the prospect of possibly having new owners. So it's only natural that people are going to latch onto those bidders. But ultimately, no one really knows the intentions of the Glazers. The bids that US hedge funds and financial groups have made to buy a minority stake are still on the table. And as far as they're concerned, the Glazers are still considering a deal like that. Now, lots of people in kind of the financial world will say that the Glazers can't really go this far down the line with people like Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sheikh Jassim without the intention to sell. But until that sale is done, no one's really going to know. It wouldn't surprise me at this point whether if the Glazers turned around and said that they weren't going, because clearly there's a vehicle there on the table to allow them to stay. They could accept investment from a hedge fund to redevelop Old Trafford, sell a stake of the club, and remain in control. Everyone will know also that Jim Ratcliffe's bid, that he's offered to let the Glazers stay at least for a couple of years as part of that anyway. So, in terms of whether United are going to have brand new owners and start of this brand new era at the start of the season, we're into the territory now where that really doesn't look like it's going to happen. But as I say, ultimately, a decision is going to have to be made one way or the other because the uncertainty is disastrous, really. It's not fair on the fans. It's not fair on the bidders. It's not fair on the manager. It's not fair on the players, the people connected with the club. It's not fair on anyone. Really, the Glazers are going to have to make a decision soon, one way or the other. The problem is that, they've already delayed it far too long. So there's nothing to say that we couldn't still be here talking about the same thing in a couple of months.
Yeah, I think that's the fear, isn't it, with Manchester United fans, especially that the Glazers turn around and say, you know what, we'll stay. It'll cause a lot of controversy, you could say, in the fan base, and will the fans start to boycott games or stuff like that? I know people say it's hard to stop loving your club, but it's mad what we had to go through for the last 18 years or so, and and then Ratcliffe as well. Like a lot of United fans, at one stage you thought, oh, Ratcliffe, I don't mind him coming in, and then when they seen that he still wants the Glazers there, they were like, yeah, no, we'll go to Sheikh Jassim. Sheikh Jassim, Jim Ratcliffe, like, to be going head to head, like, I'm not sure if many know, but like, who do you reckon is in pole position? Because one day you're getting told it's Ratcliffe, next day you're getting told it's Sheikh Jassim.
I mean, again, that's the golden question. The bidders will tell you that they don't even know who is, deemed to be kind of the front runner. Obviously, the two bids have got pros and cons. If the Glazers do want to stay in some capacity, then Jim Ratcliffe's bid obviously offers them that opportunity. It offers them the opportunity to have some kind of say going forward, to still make money from the club. Obviously, Sheikh Jassim's bid is for 100% of the club. It would give them a quick and easy out if they wanted to cash in all their chips, leave and just see the back of United for the last time. Then Sheikh Jassim's bid is the one that they should take. Again, there are pros and cons for the club and for the fans. I understand the frustration or the anger possibly that Jim Ratcliffe wants to keep the Glazers on board, but he wouldn't be doing that unless he felt that was the only way of taking control of Man United. He's a very, very smart businessman. He will understand the implications of keeping the Glazers in some kind of capacity, and the reason that he will be offering to do that is because he thinks it's the best way of wresting some kind of control away from them. Obviously, United fans will look at Sheikh, or the majority, of United fans will look at Sheikh Jassim and say, well, that's the bid that we want because the money in Qatar, the links with their sovereign wealth fund mean that's the guy that could have United compete again with the likes of with Man City. But obviously there are downsides to that as well. No one really knows where that money is coming from. this is a guy that no one really here knows that much about. Even his PR team right at the start couldn't tell you how old he was. They couldn't tell you how many children he had. Those things matter when it comes to owning a football club, because these are custodians of a club that's been around for an awful long time. It's been the central part of a community in Manchester for an awful long time, and it's very naive to say, well, this is the guy we want because we think he's the richest. That's the wrong way to go about it. There are pros and cons of both these bids. My personal opinion is that I think that as long as the Glazers go, then that's a step in the right direction. Obviously, there are lots of questions for both of those guys, Sir Jim and Sheikh Jassim, to answer if they got to a stage where they were owning Man United, but we're not there yet. I think we've seen over the last, since 2005, since the Glazers took charge, that the Glazers are not fit to own Man United, and the first step is having them out and new owners in. But as I say, beyond that, there are still questions for Sir Jim and Sheikh Jassim to answer.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, yeah, it is. It's an interesting one. It is. I mean, you said there, no one know how many kids he had, and this and that. No one knew how old he was, who was. I mean, Tom, any questions about the takeover for Rob?
No, I mean, to be honest, all my questions there are covered already, but because I'm not it's all like there's so much to be caught up in with the ownership, can't go think of the minute, sure, but there was one question I wanted to ask about Caicedo, the Brighton midfielder. What do you reckon on him? What are our chances of signing him, do you reckon? Because obviously we've dropped interest in Mount, so what do you reckon our chances are in Caicedo?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of I mean, the talking about the transfer window kind of fits into the ownership. I mean, there is a fear among Man United fans that the uncertainty over the ownership is going to impact the plans for the summer window. Now, I can understand where that's coming from. United insist that that's not the case, that there is still money to be spent. It won't be a massive amount. There is obviously quite well documented FFP restrictions that will cap the summer budget, and United will have to cut their cloth accordingly. The three positions really that need to be strengthened this summer are up front. They need a striker, they need a midfielder, at least one midfielder, and they probably need a goalkeeper. In terms of Moises Caicedo, he's a player that United have looked at for a long time. Before he even joined Brighton, they were in the mix to sign him. Obviously, since he's joined Brighton, he's been fantastic. He's incredible in that midfield under De Zerbi last season. I think Brighton have been quite clear that they expect him to leave, and United should be in the market for players of that caliber. Again, the problem will be asking price. One of the problems with Mason Mount is that they're not willing to pay the 70 million that Chelsea wanted. Chelsea have even come down in their evaluation, and United still don't want to match that. Caicedo, I don't think he's going anywhere for less than 70 million, and it's whether United have that 70 million plus another, 70 or 80 possibly for a striker as well, and then a goalkeeper on top of that. And really, that's the problem. It will be about Erik ten Hag prioritising these positions and deciding which area of the squad he needs to strengthen first. I think everyone can see that Moises Caicedo, as a player, would improve Man United, but I don't know how Man United fans would react if United went out and spent 70 million on him and then said, well, we can't afford to sign a striker, and we're left with Anthony Martial and Marcus Rashford possibly shifted into the centre again. So I mean, the interest in Caicedo is genuine. He's viewed as an alternative target to Mason Mount. The bid for Mason Mount is still on the table. If Chelsea decide that they want to take that, then that deal would probably go through. But United feel that those negotiations have stalled to the point where they need to look elsewhere. And it's not just Caicedo. They've looked at other midfielders to see what kind of availability there is out there and what other deals there are to be had. But it doesn't help the frustration among United fans when they hear that United are monitoring this player or interested in that player. They want to see a player holding a scarf or a shirt on the pitch at Old Trafford, and really, United fans are right really in demanding that, because it's a really crucial summer in terms of catching City, and without new players, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on. I mean, Casado would be a player I'd like, but then 70 million, and as you said, Rob, have Man United got an extra 70 or 80 million above that for a striker? Because I think we need a striker more than some would say we need a striker more than a midfielder, and I think we do. As you said, especially for the catch Man City, which I'm not sure if it's a hard job to do. And also Declan Rice. Now again, I know City. I think they're City Arsenal. They're kind of battling that out. But supposedly we're in there as well, another player that we're interested in. Supposedly they'd like to give, does it McTominay or Maguire plus obviously cash on top of that. Could you see a deal like that happen, or do you reckon it's just another one of those we're interested in, but doesn't mean we're going to do anything? Because he's worth.
I mean, I think the Rice thing probably sums up United's financial position quite well. Again, United are interested. Why wouldn't you be? He's one of the best midfielders in the Premier League, and United are keen to sign a midfielder. There would be a problem if United weren't interested in him. The problem, again, is West Ham's valuation. Again, West Ham have been quite clear that they expect him to leave this summer, but he's got a year left on his contract. West Ham, hold another option to extend that for another year, which would take him to 2025. So even though they expect Rice to go, they hold quite a lot of power in that. And unless someone meets their valuation, that he probably won't go anywhere. West Ham so far have said that they want 100 million in guaranteed payments. Arsenal have had a bid not back, I think, of 75 plus 15. City's opening bid was something like 80 million down with another 10 million in add-ons. Both of those have been rejected, which shows that West Ham are willing to stick to their guns. At those kind of numbers that in the bids that have been knocked back, United just aren't competitive. United just haven't got that money. That's why you're hearing, interest of bids with 40 million down with possibly two other players on top. West Ham just aren't going to go for that. West Ham are looking for better players to boost their squad, but they still want the 100 million for Rice. So if maybe if United could offer them 100 million plus McTominay, maybe that would get West Ham talking to them. But that's just a million miles away from what I can tell of United's budget, and that's why you're not really hearing United in the mix for Declan Rice. There's going to be lots in the next couple of days and weeks about Arsenal submitting a new bid and City going back with their second bid. Possibly Calvin Phillips being involved in that. But United, while it's obvious that they would have interest in a player like Declan Rice, they just aren't going to be in the mix because they just don't have the money to do that. Again, it will be about prioritising. I'm sure some fans would be watching this saying, "Well, I want Rice, and that's the guy that's going to improve the squad, and just use the budget on Declan Rice." Well, there's a possibility that could happen, I suppose, but that would mean probably no goalkeeper and probably no striker. It's going to be about Erik ten Hag looking at the players who are available, looking at the budget that he has, and finding a balance between those. And that is going to be really, really difficult this summer for the recruitment team and for Ten Hag because you're looking at a summer where you really need to make what I would call vast improvements to the squad if you're going to get anywhere near City. And the danger is that you start the summer thinking, well, this is what we need to bridge the gap or start to bridge the gap with City. And in the end, what you do is end up ultimately standing still. And in the summer, you see Liverpool strengthen, you see Chelsea strengthen, Tottenham strengthen, three clubs who all missed out on the top four, who were all going to get better. And then suddenly it's not about, can United challenge for the Premier League title? It's about, can United maintain their place in the top four? And that's not a position that you want to be in. And unfortunately, we've seen that time and time again at United. These summers, these crucial, pivotal summers where they need a really strong injection of quality into the squad. It just doesn't happen. And that chance to make the next step up doesn't happen. And, for the next season and the season after, you're just scrabbling around trying to finish in the top four. And that's just not where United should be. And it's not where United fans want them to be.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I would like Declan Rice at United, but as you said, with the funds Man United have, it's very unlikely, especially this summer as well. I actually want to ask one more question before we move on. Does anyone know how much Ten Hag has to spend? Is it 120 million or something like that this summer? Or has that been released yet?
No, I mean, United would never release that publicly, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, we're led to believe it's somewhere between 100 million and 150 million. With sales, any money generated by sales would be added. The bulk of that would be added on top of that. The problem with these budgets is that you've seen last summer that they can change wildly. I mean, the budget last summer was around the same. That's the budget that they set out to spend. In the end, Ajax put a premium on Anthony. United decided that they did want to spend that money, and they ended up doing it, and that caused United to spend more last summer than they initially planned. It also meant there was no money to spend really in January, which Ten Hag was a little bit frustrated about. So these budgets are not set in stone. It's about the deals that are available and what United can get over the line. And as I say, you saw last summer that budget changed quite dramatically. I can't see that happening this summer necessarily, mainly because the budget's limited by FFP restrictions. You just talk about the ownership there. It's not even the case that if Sheikh Jassim, for example, were to take over in the next week, he couldn't pump £1 billion into the squad because they would breach FFP restrictions. United need to make sure that they don't breach FFP, and that will dominate the way that they spend their money this summer. So, while last summer they set out to spend a certain amount and ended up spending more than that, I can't really see that happening this summer. The only thing that will affect the budget, relatively dramatically, is what kind of money that they can make through sales. But again, you're talking about United's recruitment. They historically have not sold well, and that's the reason why FFP is a problem now. That they haven't sold well. They haven't made money on players. They've taken massive hits on big transfers, and it affects FFP, and then that has a knock-on effect to the money that you can spend going forward. So, hopefully, United will certainly hope that they can make a bit of money or raise a bit of money from selling players. Hopefully add that to the budget, and maybe possibly you get up towards sort of 200 million mark, because really, you're looking at what other clubs are doing. That's probably the absolute minimum that they need to spend to start being competitive with the likes of Man City again.
Yeah, I think that's my problem, isn't it? Like you said as well, Rob, we're not competitive enough in the transfer market, which it's cost us. And again, you look at like you said, their player sales. Like we're not, it's not great at selling players. Like we got rid of Zidane, Iqbal. Was it even 1 million? I think 865k, and then I think it was plus add-ons and stuff like that. So someone should probably maybe we should have got more from as well. But what do I know? Obviously Michael's hopping in there now. So Michael has things.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, and it's a pleasure seeing you, Rob. It's a pleasure coming on.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I think the most important thing, I don't know what I've missed actually, but if I'm to say, I think the most important thing or question surrounding every Manchester United right now has to do with, the club sales situation, which obviously is now a boring topic, if you know what I mean, because the Glazers, nobody knows their intentions, and with the launch of the new kits, the new home kits today, there were a lot of protests right there in the mega store at Old Trafford. So most persons are thinking that, that could actually propel the Glazers to probably do the right thing and declare the perfect or declare the preferred bidder, if you know what I mean. So, Rob, I want to ask you, the month is ending next week. Do you think in any way or in any capacity, we might get to the face of exclusivity, if you know what I mean? Because previous reports over the past months, there were reports that countered the rumor where most persons felt Sheikh Jassim was ahead and, was approaching that level. Do you think there's any hope or any, will I say, any chance that we might get something positive with regards to the sales situation, maybe by the end of the month, come June 30, following the release of the launch of the home kit for the club, the new home kit? Do you think there's any? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a bit of a stretch, to think that they could do something by the end of the month, because, like you say, we're almost there anyway. The last that we were told about timelines was that, despite that March deadline and the deadline by the end of the season, that about a month before the end of the season, that they were delaying any kind of decision until after the season. Possibly because they didn't want to deal with the fan protests and all that at home games and the disruption that could possibly cause. Obviously, now we're well beyond the end of the season. The bidders have, in their mind, have done everything that they've been asked to do, and so they really are just waiting. That they're just waiting for some kind of communication from the Glazers or Rain Group to tell them that they have been successful or not. And really, the phrase that's been bandied around is that they're just in a holding pattern. They're just waiting. They haven't been given any indication that to expect anything by the end of the month. That said, they haven't been told not to either, and that really sums up where we're at the moment. That even the bidders who are at the front of the queue to buy Man United, are still as in the dark as the fans, and that, as I said before, is a really difficult situation for the club. In terms of timeline, I mean, they've missed so many deadlines now, or so many kind of artificial deadlines, that it wouldn't surprise me now if this wasn't resolved before the start of the season. The Glazers have shown that they are in no rush at all to resolve this. I think we're into an 8th month now. We're getting close to, or getting towards, kind of a year of this. And the Glazers have shown publicly no appetite to get this resolved. And even there's an AGM, I think tomorrow. I think it's in New York, and the people who are involved in that aren't really expecting any kind of update about the process and what's happening. And that says everything, really. That it's the Glazers who hold all the cards with this. There is no set deadline. There's no set time frame for them to make a decision. They can take as long as they want. And the problem I've got with that is that the Glazers have been involved with United since 2005. You would think at some point during that time that they would have developed some kind of affinity and affection for the club beyond the dividends, beyond the payments, all that kind of stuff, that they would want to see United do well. And they will know that, even though this uncertainty isn't having a specific impact, say, on the transfer budget, uncertainty like that around a football club is a disaster, really. And really, it was a chance. They have had the chance to do the right thing, to take the money and to leave. And they've shown once again that they aren't willing to do that. And, the mood around Manchester at the moment is that lots of fans just aren't going to believe that the Glazers are going until they actually see a new owner in charge. As I said before, the Glazers, aside from that statement in November, haven't really released their intentions. And until they do, no one really knows what they're planning to do, and they hold all the cards. That the power's with them in this.
Yeah, it is. I mean, well said, Rob. Good question, Michael. It is an interesting, time to be a Manchester United fan. It's a crazy time. Let's be brutally honest here. These last couple of months, especially for people like ourselves, Rob, covering United and stuff like that, I reckon it's been a hectic few months. Or maybe when you really walked into this corresponding and journalist stuff, because Manchester United keep us all busy, don't really keep us on our toes, is what I say, as well. I mean, like, we move back to, someone spoke about De Gea in the comments there. Will we see De Gea maybe extend his contract or renew his contract, or will Manchester United let him leave as a new agent, or what can you see happening with De Gea?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a strange situation in that, United don't tend to give that much away, even privately, really, on contract negotiations. But a couple of months ago, they felt confident enough with David De Gea to say that they thought they were close to an agreement, that most of the nuts and bolts of a new contract had been agreed, and they were really just waiting to have that signed and ratified. That the problem is that confidence that was there a couple of months ago has steadily sort of drained away, and now there is a real possibility that he will leave and he's played his last game for United. I think you can probably tell that the situation's changed quite dramatically in the last sort of couple of weeks, because David played his last game at Old Trafford. There was no kind of big lap of honour. There was no kind of ceremony, that he kind of just walked off, as normal. There was nothing at the FA Cup final. Obviously, it's difficult at a cup final that you just got beaten in, but there was nothing to suggest there that he thought that he was leaving. But the noises coming out of Man United are now that what they thought was a done deal is now certainly not, and it's thrown lots of the transfer planning up in the air, really, because if David De Gea stays, you've got an established number one already at the club. If he leaves, you need to sign someone. You need to sign another number one, and that's going to cost money and take money out of an already restricted transfer budget. I think United's hope is still that he stays, because they really can't afford to sign a number one goalkeeper, an established centre forward, and a high level, top quality midfielder. If they sign David to a new contract, then you can possibly go out and get a cheaper option to add competition to him. But if he leaves, it changes the whole dynamic of the summer. The problem is, again, that United are losing a little bit of power in this situation. I think everyone will know that they wanted David to sign a contract on reduced wages, but with quite big performance-related bonuses. They didn't want to pay him that 375 grand a week. That's why they didn't trigger his option that would have taken him to 2024, because they didn't want to carry on paying him that amount of money. But the longer this goes on, the more and more power De Gea has, because he will know as well as anyone that United probably haven't got the money to go out and buy a replacement. And so if United are in that position financially, then it becomes a priority for them to extend David's contract. And then maybe David can go back and say, well, actually, I'm not going to sign that. I want a little bit more money here. I want that bonus to be a little bit higher. Really, again, it's more uncertainty. You talk about the uncertainty of the ownership situation, which is damaging. This kind of uncertainty is damaging as well, because Erik ten Hag needs to know who is in his squad for next season. I think United either need to sign him and get the deal done, or be quite ruthless and say, thanks, we've had a great, 10 or 12 years, you've been fantastic, but now we're moving in a different direction. The uncertainty around his future is damaging, really, and it needs to be resolved one way or the other.
Do you reckon, De Gea leaving is this De Gea's decision, or it's just something to do with Ten Hag? Would you reckon?
No, I mean, Ten Hag in press conferences last year was defended David De Gea every time he made a mistake. There were some horrible mistakes away at Seville, away at West Ham, even in the FA Cup final against Man City. And after each mistake, he was, very supportive of David, said that he wanted him to stay, said he wanted him to sign a new contract. We're led to believe still that United still want him to stay, that Erik ten Hag wants him to stay. I think at the moment it's on David. If David wants to stay, then he can do. But it's also his prerogative, as a free agent, which essentially he is now, to look at what other offers are on the table. He will be well aware that there's an awful lot of money being spent by clubs in Saudi Arabia, and if he was looking to get his big wages somewhere else, and that's probably the place that he should start. I think it makes life easier for Erik ten Hag if he stays, because then he could look for a cheaper option as a backup to offer him competition, and then say to the pair of them, well, you go out and fight it out and we'll see who's the best. Again, if David De Gea leaves, then your options are either to bring back Dean Henderson and start him, start with Tom Heaton, or to go out and sign someone like, I don't know, Diogo Costa or Onana at Inter Milan, and probably spend the best part of 50 million bringing them in, and that's 50 million a chunk out of your transfer budget. Again, really, the uncertainty around that needs to be resolved really, really quickly, because having uncertainty around such a pivotal position as your goalkeeper is no good for anyone. It needs to be resolved, and just simply so Ten Hag knows who's going to be in the squad for next season, because we've seen time and time again with United these issues drag on towards the end of the deadline, or the end of the transfer window, and then you're into sort of panic buy territory, which is just not where you want to be.
Yeah, personally, I'd actually miss De Gea if he went. I know, look at the past season he had, and he made a few mistakes here and there, but like, I don't mind if he stays. If he stays, he stays. If he goes, he goes. I won't be going crazy whatsoever. Because like Ten Hag seems to like him, as you said, Rob. He's backed him a few times. People are looking at, like, for example, like you said, the Sevilla game and the FA Cup final against Man City, and I'm probably missing a few other games as well. So they're not looking at De Gea in his whole career. They're just looking at one bad season. Yeah. It's like a Rashford last season, though. You look at Rashford last season. He wasn't great. People are like, oh, get him gone. Look at this season, brilliant. I know Rashford's different position and he's a lot younger, but people can change in 3 months or so.
I think the one thing to say possibly with De Gea is that United are going to have to move on for him eventually. Yeah. If Ten Hag wants to play this the way that he wants to play, with that passing out of the back, David De Gea is probably not the goalkeeper to do that. They are going to have to move on from him at some stage. The question is whether they can do it this summer, or whether that's something that's going to have to wait further down the line. And this is a situation that started last summer, that Erik Ten Hag knew last summer that David De Gea wasn't particularly comfortable with the ball at his feet, wasn't as comfortable with the ball as some of the players that he'd had at Ajax, and he knew that he would have to probably change his goalkeeper at some stage. Last summer, the decision was made to stick with David, because he knew that they didn't have the money to bring in another number one goalkeeper. Again, we're in that situation again now. So, I don't think there's really any question about whether United and Ten Hag are going to have to move on eventually from David De Gea. It's whether they do it this summer, or whether he spends his money in other areas this summer, a striker, a midfielder, and does it and waits for the chance to sign an established number one, perhaps in 12 months' time. Again, it's about Ten Hag prioritising and him deciding where this money needs to be spent.
Yeah, and if I'm to add to what Rob just said, when you look at modern day goalkeepers right now, and you look at David De Gea and you look at his age, he cannot improve or become that goalkeeper that we want to see. And most Man United fans, they kind of compare the City circumstance then when Pep came in. As good as Joe Hart was, he was shipped away. Pep had to make sure that he brought in a ball playing goalkeeper, a goalkeeper who is good at his feet, regardless of sentiment and all of that. So that is what I think Erik Ten Hag and Manchester United have to do to ensure that we progress to the next level, because we cannot play the exact system or style that Ten Hag wants, because you have to build from the back. If you don't build from the back, there will be a problem, And how good do your long balls, how exact, or how accurate are they? And obviously, De Gea is not that kind of player. So we need to have somebody like an Onana, like you rightly said, somebody like a Costa, and maybe Maigan of AC Milan, those class of goalkeepers who can actually, they can contribute to attack from behind. So it's high time we consider letting De Gea go. But there might be a very obvious reasons as to why he's to stay. Like you said, we might be, let's say, our hands might be tight in terms of finance, considering what has been wrong with the club for years and decades right now, So let's see how it goes, and we hope, De Gea, he accepts being the number 2 goalkeeper, and maybe we bring in an Onana, or he still manages to be the number 1. Not really number 1, but he just manages to understand that, okay, you can't be the number 1. we're going to bring in somebody who's going to compete with you. You know, it's going to be you're going to be on, you're going to be off. So it's a very huge decision for Manchester United. So over to you, Dean.
I think what City have shown in the past, you mentioned City and that situation that Pep Guardiola had with Joe Hart and Claudio Bravo, that City have shown themselves to be very, very ruthless when it matters. And that's something that United over the last sort of decade really haven't been. You know, you could even look at this summer and you've got players, you know, like the likes of Harry Maguire, for example, is clearly well down the pecking order at Man United. You know, Ten Hag can say as much as he wants that he likes Harry Maguire. Well, he clearly doesn't, because he doesn't play. You know, they've had Luke Shaw there, they've had Victor Lindelof, they've got Varane and Martinez. You've got a load of players there who can fill in, and Maguire is clearly well down the list. Well, you know, in that situation, you need to tell Harry Maguire that he isn't going to play, that he needs to find a new club. You need to get his wages off the books. You need to get, you know, whether it's 30 or 40 million, you need to go and get that money and reinvest it. You can't have a situation where you're telling Harry Maguire, if you want to stay, you can do, because that's not ruthless. You know, you can't have players making decisions like that about their own futures. Really, those decisions have to come from the very top. And Pep Guardiola, you know, like him or loathe him, has done that consistently at Man City, and that they've let legends leave. They've let players go who were above 30, who they thought were asking too much money. And you just have to look at this summer with Ilkay Gundogan. You know, Gundogan is still clearly having a massive impact on that team because of what he did in the FA Cup final. He asked for a little bit more money, that he asked for a 3-year contract and not a 2-year contract. And instead of buckling to his demands, City said, well, no, you know, we're not going to do that. We're not going to pay you the money we want. We're going to stick to our guns. You can have 2 years, but if you want 3 years, you're going to have to go to Barcelona. And he's gone to Barcelona. Now, City are comfortable in doing that because they know that their recruitment is good enough to replace him. And, you know, and it's possible that they could start next season with Declan Rice in midfield. You know, that's the kind of example that United need to follow. And we've seen time and time again, you know, it's not just recruitment decisions, it's these bad squad management decisions, you know, whether it's giving Phil Jones a new contract or Chris Smalling or Marcus Rojo. You know, all these decisions all add up. You know, you wonder why there isn't that much money to spend and why FFP is beginning to bite. Well, it is because of those decisions. It's, you know, you can't look at those decisions in isolation. Those are the kind of decisions that other top clubs, and, you know, I'm sorry to use the example again and again of Man City, but you know, at least on the pitch, they are very, very well run. City just don't make those decisions. United, unfortunately, have made a lot of bad decisions, and that's why they're in the situation that they find themselves in this summer.
Yeah, exactly. We need what City have, what we don't have as well. That's another thing. Nerves of steel. We don't have that. We don't have the gut to say, right, you're asking for too much. We have to let you go. Find a new club. But I don't know why. I would like us to be that club, but unfortunately, we're not. And like Onana, supposedly, his agent was in Manchester last week discussing with Manchester United. Obviously, Onana played under Ten Hag at Ajax. Do you reckon, I don't know, like, is it, like, how are we trying to say this, heavy interest? Like, are we like, does Ten Hag really want this goalkeeper, or is it just like, yeah, we're just going to keep our options open if the head does leave?
No, I mean, the interest is certainly there. I mean, you said there that he's a player that Ten Hag obviously likes. He knows well. You know, Ten Hag clearly values that. He signed Martinez and Anthony last summer. He clearly values, you know, players that he knows well from previous clubs. So, you know, Onana would fit into that box. He also fits the style that he wants to play with being a bit more competent with the ball at his feet. He's clearly a very good goalkeeper. I think, you know, demonstrated that with Inter in their run to the Champions League final. The issue at the moment, has been valuation. That the last that we were told was that United spoke to his representatives. We're told that Inter would probably want 40 million or upwards of that, and the United said, well, you know, we probably haven't got that. again, though, that was at a time when they were really pushing to sign Mason Mount. So, is it possible that they could go back and say, well, we will pay that transfer fee for Onana? Well, yeah, of course it is. He ticks a lot of boxes for the kind of goalkeeper that Man United are looking for. But again, it's about United cutting the cloth accordingly. If they sign a midfielder for 60 million, for example, and a goalkeeper for 40, then maybe you only have 20, 30, 40 million for a striker. Could you get an established top quality number 9 for that kind of money? Probably not. So again, it's down to Ten Hag to decide, or will be down to Ten Hag to decide which out of those positions, where in the squad does he definitely need to spend that money? Is a striker more important than a midfielder? Is a goalkeeper more important than a striker? Unfortunately, this summer there isn't a massive transfer budget, and they are gonna have to be quite smart, United, in the way that they manage that. It feels very doom and gloom at the moment. It's important to say that we are still very, very early in this transfer window. There's a long way to go, and you probably shouldn't judge a window until the day after it shuts. Obviously, at the moment, because other teams are doing business and signing players that you would think United would also be interested in, that it's creating this kind of frustrating among fans, and that's natural because to go back to a point we made right at the start of this, the overall aim of this summer is to get United closer to Man City. Right now, are they closer to Man City? Well, no. City are going to sign Kovacic from Chelsea. They're right in the mix to sign Declan Rice. They might sign Gvardiol from RB Leipzig as well. So not only are they not closer, they look again like they're slipping even further behind. So you just have to hope that by the end of this window, the day after it shuts, that United are in a better position than they were at the end of last season. Again, United fans will listen to this and watch this and think, well, I'll believe it when I see it, and that's understandable given what's happened over the last 10 years.
Yeah, in your opinion, Rob, when you look at the United squad, what you look at and say, they need to sign someone in that position.
I mean, if it was a personal preference, my preference, going off what the budget is, my preference would be an established centre forward and a goalkeeper. I can understand why Ten Hag wants a midfielder because Christian Eriksen, as good as he was, is clearly getting towards the end of his career. Tired quite significantly towards the end of games. His form dipped quite a lot in the second. He had great games here and there, but the second half of that season looked quite tired. So I can understand why they want someone in there to perhaps replace him or to job share with him. I think the goalkeeper is fundamental. The goalkeeper has to change because the way that Ten Hag wants to play starts with the goalkeeper, and he won't be able to play the way that he wants with David De Gea in goal. So you need to change the goalkeeper. And if that means spending 40 or 50 or even 60 million on a goalkeeper and letting David De Gea go, then you have to, because that's the way that Ten Hag wants to play. The other gaping hole in the squad is up front. Again, in my mind, I would pay the money that Tottenham want for Harry Kane. I think he's by far and away the outstanding candidate to play in that position for Man United. Obviously, there are difficulties in dealing with Tottenham and dealing with Daniel Levy, which are well documented. But if you have 150 million to spend, for example, give or take, you spend 100 million on Kane, you spend 50 million on a goalkeeper, I think that improves the squad. Hopefully you can, make a few sales, get rid of the likes of, Harry Maguire, David goes possibly, maybe bring in a little bit more for a few of the fringe players. My preference, if it was down to me personally, I would sign a goalkeeper and a centre forward. I think they're the two biggest issues in that squad. The goalkeeper clearly affects the way that you play. If you haven't got a goalkeeper that can pass the ball, then you aren't going to be able to play out from the back. And last season, United struggled to score goals. They didn't have a reliable goal scorer. They didn't score enough goals. I think they were one of the lowest scorers in the top 10 of the Premier League, which says everything. I think Harry Kane would solve that. sign those two players. I think that you are closer to City.
Yeah, Tom, any questions for Rob? Well, I just charged my laptop.
Just one more actually. If we do sign a keeper, who do you reckon the most likely keeper will sign? Out of all the keepers we're linked with, Raya, Costa, Onana. If we were to sign one, who would you reckon be the most likely one would sign?
I mean, I think that depends on what happens with De Gea. I think if De Gea stays, you could begin to look at players like Jan Sommer at Bayern, who is obviously past 30, but would be second choice at Bayern behind Neuer, providing that he's fit. You could possibly get him on some kind of reduced fee. If David goes, then you need to spend money on an established number one. I think the most likely, if that were to happen, is probably Onana, given that Ten Hag knows him really well from Ajax. That Inter are looking to sell some first-team players this summer. I mean, personally, I would have Raya at Brentford. Again, United will know what the valuation of him is. It's been well documented that he's available for around 40 million. I think Tottenham are interested. Again, I can only presume that the reason that United haven't gone and firmed up they're interested in him is because they don't think that they got 40 million to go and do the deal. If you remove the need for a midfielder, if you say, well, we're not going to try and sign Caicedo, we're not going to sign Mount, you can use that money then to possibly buy him, or to buy, maybe Costa at Porto or Onana. As I say, I mean, if I was pushed, I would say that Onana's probably more likely at the moment, but a lot of that depends what happens with David De Gea.
Yeah, there's a lot of Man United fans chanting already, the Onana, what's his name song. So you could imagine if we do sign him, that'd be all around Old Trafford. I was actually singing that last week doing a news show. I mean, let's move on to strikers. I mean, we're linked to Kane. Osimhen's a bit. Colin Moani came in to the scene last week. Will we get him? I'm not sure. Harry Kane, supposedly we've dropped interest. I started off with Harry Kane. So we've dropped interest in Kane, but if Daniel Levy drops this 100 million price tag to 80, 70, do you reckon United could maybe walk back in? Or is this interest like Harry Kane? They're just like, no, we don't care what happens. We're done.
No, I mean, I think if Tottenham indicated to United that they were willing to do a deal for Harry Kane, that United would be right in the middle of that. They've got no qualms about Harry Kane's quality, the goals that he scored, the fact that he's Premier League proven. The issue has been Tottenham's valuation for a player who's only got a year left on his contract, and also not really wanting to deal with Daniel Levy because they know that Levy likes to drag these things out towards the transfer deadline. They don't want to be in a position, hours before the window closes without a striker, having hedged all your bets on Harry Kane. They said from very early on that they were reluctant to get involved in that with Daniel Levy. Again, though, in that one, specifically, Kane holds all the power because he's got a year left on his contract. If he tells Tottenham that he's not going to sign a new contract and that he's either going to leave this summer or leave for free in 12 months, it's possible that Tottenham may be ringing the likes of United and Bayern and possibly even Real Madrid to say, actually, we've softened our stance, let's talk. And I think if that was the case, United would be right in the middle of that. The other strikers, you've mentioned a lot of them there, Højlund at Atlanta, Moani, obviously who plays for the French national team, Martinez at Inter, because Inter again are going to have to sell a couple of players this summer. The one thing that's come out of United is that there is no magic list of strikers that no one knows about. The strikers that are being linked are being linked because they are the strikers that United feel would improve the squad and could possibly be available. Again, though, you're talking about valuations and things, and there's a lot of people in the recruitment department who like Højlund, but Atalanta so far have stuck what they believe to be an unrealistic valuation on him for a guy that's not really scored that many goals. Kane again. United believe that to value a player with 1 year left on his contract at £100 million is far too much. Martinez, United have been linked with him for years. Ed Woodward was at one stage quite keen to sign for United to sign Martinez, but again, you're talking about what Inter Milan's valuation would be. So it's really going to be really tough for United this summer. They're in a position where they need really high quality additions to the squad, but haven't really got the money to do them. They're going to have to be creative. They're going to have to negotiate well. They're probably going to need a little bit of help from the players as well. Players who make it clear to their clubs that they want to leave, they want to join Man United. United is still an attractive possibility for lots of these players. The difficulty historically has been getting these deals over the line, and again, United fans, it's all very well us sat here talking about all these strikers, but United fans are going to be sat there thinking, well, I actually want to see a player on the pitch at Old Trafford holding up the shirt, because that's the only way really that they're going to believe that United are moving in the right direction with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think in City they were interested in Kane at one stage, and he just walked away. I think they got Jack Grealish instead that season or that summer. I could be wrong. So even Man City, who have a good bit of money, just didn't want to negotiate or deal with Daniel Levy. Are the strikers that we are interested in or monitoring, I'm trying not to put you on the spot. Who can you see as likely getting if we do get a striker?
I can see. I mean, obviously, if I was Man United, I would be pushing the boat out to sign Kane. Obviously, that might not be able to happen. I think Højlund is probably the most realistic target, but again, there are negatives with that as well. That he's still very, very young. He hasn't scored a massive amount of goal in Italy. Clearly the potential is there, and that's what United have identified. But for a young guy to come in and be United's number 9 is an awful lot of pressure on a striker who hasn't really played an awful lot of games. United will hope if they sign him that he will realise all that obvious potential that he's got, and that he will become a kind of Haaland type goal scorer, this kind of goal scoring machine. But you just don't know. It may be that United need to take a risk with that and sign him in the hope that he kind of becomes the player that they want him to be. Certainly they did that with Anthony last summer. That United privately will admit that they overpaid for Anthony, but what they paid for the player that they thought he will become, not for the player that he is right now. Again, it's a similar sort of story. Anthony is a young player who hadn't played an awful lot of games. His numbers in terms of goals and assists weren't through the roof, but United hope that given time and a bit of development and a bit of coaching, that he will become that player who's contributing 15, 20 goals and 15, 20 assists a season. And Højlund is the same, that his goal scoring record is not stand out right now, but he's still very, very young, and the hope would be that he is a striker who could possibly add 20, 25 goals a season. So United have shown that they are willing to take a risk. They did that with Anthony last summer. So it's possible that they will be looking at Højlund in the same way. I think that in terms of the strikers who are achievable this summer, he will be right up there, simply because he's made it known that he wants to sign for Man United. But again, it will be about Atalanta reducing their valuation of him, because United just aren't going to pay €80 million for him.
Yeah, I mean, I would like Harry Kane. I think he'd improve us a lot up top. Premier League proven, established. Højlund, I mean, with the amount that Atalanta won from, it's a bit much. I mean, Tom, we'll let you come in, Tom, with a question for Rob, maybe about the strikers. Sorry.
about Haaland, like, you know, because we're asking for a lot of money for a player like that isn't exactly, you know, only what we've seen for a while, not scored much goals. Like, how likely do you think it is we'll actually end up signing him? Like, or do you think this will get done this summer, or do you reckon we might have to wait another year, or else maybe we'll refuse to pay the amount they're asking, or what do you reckon will overall probably happen with Haaland and Sealy?
I mean, I can see that one happening. You know, United clearly need a striker, as I said before. In terms of which of those targets are achievable, United will look at that deal and think that's probably one that they can get over the line. They will hope that Atalanta at some stage drop their valuation and maybe sort of help them out a little bit. You know, ideally, I think at one stage United were looking at maybe having two strikers, an established number 9 and also a younger striker to kind of come in and not start every week, but play every now and again, and kind of you know, sign a player with one eye on the future. And Højlund would fit into that role probably better than the guy that needs to come in straight away and is expected to score 30 goals. Again, it depends on the budget, where the money is available. I can certainly see the Højlund deal getting done eventually. My concern would be that you're signing a striker in the hope that he can score 30 goals rather than with the knowledge that he is capable of scoring 30 goals, which is what you get with Harry Kane. You know, with any signing, there's no guarantee that that's going to work. You know, it's to sign any kind of player in any situation is always a risk. You know, clearly given his age and his goal scoring record, signing Højlund is probably more of a risk than signing Harry Kane. But it may be that United have to take a risk. It may be that the budget is that restricted that they end up in a situation where, you know, they have to take that kind of risk. And, you know, then you can only hope that it pays off and that he becomes the player that they hope he does, and that in, I don't know, 5 years' time, you're looking back thinking, wow, what a bargain that was.
And also, about, like, I know obviously we might not get a midfielder, but if we were to get a midfielder, like, who would you say? Because I know with limited budget, we probably won't. But if we did end up like buying a midfielder, who would you most likely reckon would buy? Like, what do you reckon? Would it be Caicedo would be the number one choice, or like most likely would sign, or do you reckon it would be someone else maybe?
I mean, I would still say in terms of probability, the most likely is Mason Mount, because they've gone so far down the line with it. They clearly want him. Chelsea clearly want to sell him and get a fee for him because they don't want to lose him for free. I think the fact that United have made 3 bids is evidence of how keen they are to sign him. I think that the fact that Chelsea have gone back and said, you know, we'll reduce our valuation for him, we'll do a deal at this price, suggests that they are also quite keen to sell. I think Mount, again, is well documented that he would be open to move into United. When you've got all 3 parties, the 2 clubs and the player, who all want a move to happen, the move tends to happen. Obviously, there's been some kind of snag in that United thought that Chelsea would drop their valuation quicker than they have done, and it's led to a little bit of an impasse in terms of those negotiations. As things stand, I would still expect that him to be the most likely midfielder to come through the door. If that doesn't happen, then you are looking at players like Moises Caicedo, but the chances are that Brighton are going to ask for more for Caicedo than Chelsea are asking for Mount. So, you know, does it make financial sense to go after Caicedo, even though your valuation of Mount is determined by how long he's got left on his contract? You know, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. I mean, I think still most likely it will be Mason Mount, but you know, clearly at the moment that those negotiations have stalled, and it will need, you know, either United or Chelsea to pick up the phone and to start talks again. But I don't think that they are actually that far away. You know, I think United's last bid was something like 55 million. Chelsea are asking for close to 65. You know, you'd be surprised at how quickly a gap of 10 million can be bridged. You know, again, you can't say that a deal's done until it's actually done. But that at the moment feels like it's still the most likely one to get done.
Mm. And do you reckon also beside Mount, like, do you reckon he have a massive impact on the team, and like he can fit our system pretty well, and like he can really like improve our team as much as possible, obviously, because I know like we need the like midfielder. Eriksen's okay and all, but like we could do with improving. Do you think Mount can really improve that midfield, and like do you think he's the right type of player to kind of fit our system or Tedek's system? Like, do you think he's that type of player, like, or what exactly qualities will he bring to the team if we do sign him? Like, and what can he can give something fans to be excited about? Like, what could he properly bring? Like,
yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff from United fans saying that they don't want Mount, that he's not the player that they think can improve him. He gets a lot of criticism when he plays for England. He got a lot of criticism at different points of his career at Chelsea. But I actually think he would fit in really well with United in the way that Ten Hag wants to play. I mean, Eriksen, he had that role that Eriksen filled. Eriksen did really well in a couple of games, more than a couple of games, obviously, but he was tiring towards the end of games, the second half of the season, whether it's because of injury or because of whether it was quite a long season, weren't as good as the way that he started the season. I think Mount would bring an awful lot of energy into midfield. He would press in the way that Ten Hag wants to press. He does create goals. He scores goals, probably doesn't score as many goals as he perhaps should do. But I think that, it's not, is it the most exciting signing in the world? Is it a Harry Kane or a Victor Osimhen signing? No, clearly not. But I think Ten Hag has identified a system player, a player that he believes could really help the system that he wants to play with. And I can see why, he would fit into that kind of number 8 role really, really well. Again, it's about getting the deal over the line now, but I can certainly understand why United and Ten Hag are interested in him.
And also, even though last season he had a poor season, like with Chelsea, like that wouldn't like turn you off him at all? Like, you still think he still can be a brilliant player after the one dodgy season? Because obviously last season he had a poor season, but like, do you think he still like improve on this, and it was just one bad season, a bit like Rashford, or would this one-off season he had last season kind of turn you off him a bit, or like what would your thoughts be on that? Like?
Not particularly. I mean, most of that would be down to his age. I mean, I think he's 24 years old, so he's not really even hit his kind of peak years for a midfield player. I think he had a little bit of trouble with injuries last season at Chelsea. You would hope that they would clear up and that you would get a full season out of him. I don't think that the fact that he struggled a little bit at Chelsea last year would turn me off at all. I think that he's done enough already. He's shown enough when he's been in the Chelsea team to show why a team like Man United and why a manager like Erik ten Hag would be interested in him. In some situations, you find that a change of scenery does a player the world of good, and maybe he does just need a change of scenery, a bit of a change of look. Clearly the potential is there, and you only have to look at the managers who have picked him to see, how good he is. It's very, very rare that different managers continually pick the same player if there isn't quality there. And I think Mason Mount has shown enough to show that he would improve that Man United midfield.
Yeah, no, because remember he was really good under two of them in the defense system. Remember he used to play like right winger when they used to do 3 at the back. So like that's the main season where he was peaking and like showing about his class. Like, and obviously he England international, but like he's a good player. Like, and I doubt it, but do you know how he used to play kind of on the right wing for Chelsea under Tuchel when they used to do a 3-4-2-1? Like, would right winger position he be any good at? Or like, I know would most likely playing him in the midfield because that's the position we're looking for. But would he ever be okay as a right winger for emergency, or would you mainly just be keeping him in the like central midfield role, or maybe kind of like that Eriksen was in?
No, I mean, I think in terms, I mean, he's obviously quite versatile. Ten Hag has been quite rigid with the system that he's played, with that 4 at the back, with a front 3. Obviously, I think if you're signing Mason Mount, you're looking to play him in central midfield in one of those kind of high midfield roles. But yeah, I mean, I think he could certainly do a job in one of the wide positions in the front 3. And Ten Hag has kind of shown that he does value a little bit of flexibility. In terms of that, you just seen in the way that he's handled players like Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes has played centrally. He's also played out wide on the right. Jadon Sancho as well started out on the right when he came back from his break. Played as the number 10, played centrally. So I certainly don't think that it would be a negative at all. I think Ten Hag would value that kind of flexibility. I don't see that Ten Hag is looking at Mason Mount thinking he's going to play on the right wing for us. But it always helps, particularly when you've got so many games and you've got a campaign in the Champions League to cover, FA Cup, Carabao Cup. You've got an awful lot of games to play. I think it's quite valuable to have players who can play in a number of different positions, and Mount, I think, would be quite comfortable out wide in the front three. Clearly, I think his preferred position and Ten Hag's preferred position for him would be inside. But yeah, I mean, his flexibility is no bad thing, certainly.
One final thing about Mount, actually, I just want to. What do you make of him defensively? Do you think defensively he can do okay, or do you think defensively he might lack a little bit?
I mean, I think one of the main reasons why United are looking at him is because his ability to press from the front. It's clearly something that Ten Hag wants his players to do. I think that's maybe one of the shortcomings with Christian Eriksen a little bit, in that you need a massive engine and a lot of energy in your legs to be able to press at the intensity that's necessary in the Premier League these days. And I think that's probably why Eriksen tired quite a lot in games. And I think Mason Mount, who's 24, has shown that he's got an awful lot of energy. When he's played for Chelsea and for England, would bring an awful lot to that. Again, you're talking about players who can fit into the way that Ten Hag wants to play, and that's one of the reasons why we've had that conversation about the goalkeeper. It's really important that Ten Hag has players in his system who he trusts to do the jobs that he wants them to do, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why Ten Hag is so high, Mount is so high on Ten Hag's wanted list.
Yeah, and I noticed his player obviously amongst time last summer. But what's your opinions on Anthony? Do you think Anthony, what was your thoughts on him last season? Do you think he can improve and he's got a lot to learn and improve, or what's your thoughts on him? Because I know a lot of friends are kind of mixed opinions on him, whether he's good or not, or but what's your thoughts on Anthony? Do you think he's one for the future, or what would you do with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he did enough to show that. I think he did enough last season to show why United signed him, and I think United will admit themselves that they overpaid for him. I don't think he's a €100 million winger just yet. Again, the hope would be that he turns into that in the next couple of years. I think clearly he needs to work on his left foot, on his right foot, that he needs to be able to go both ways. He needs to be able to not only cut in and shoot, but he also needs to go outside fullbacks and cross and make assists. I think that's one area that's glaringly obvious that he needs to improve on. Again, though, I think the thing that maybe gets overlooked with Anthony is that, he doesn't score. Well, he didn't score 25 goals. He didn't have 25 assists, but he was very specifically a system player for Ten Hag. Ten Hag knew exactly what he was getting because he had him at Ajax. He works very hard in that role. He presses from the front. He tracks back. I think that, obviously these days that you judge footballers often by stats, how many goals they scored, how many assists. I think there's an awful lot to Anthony's game that probably Ten Hag values quite highly that you can't measure with a number. And that's the reason he's at the club. And that's the reason why when he was fit, he always played in those big games. I think clearly there's room for improvement there. He's still a very, very young player. He's got time on his side. I think United fans would probably like to see next season him working on his weaker foot. And that's an area that he could obviously improve on. I think there's obviously a great deal of potential there. It will be down to Anthony to realise that, and down to Ten Hag and his coaching staff to get it out of him. Because obviously, clearly United need more from him than he offered last season. But there's enough evidence there, I think, right now to suggest that he'll be fine at Old Trafford. He just needs to improve. Work on the areas of his game that are clearly a weak spot, and just get better and better.
Yeah. And one final question I have, it's about Jadon Sancho. Do you reckon this summer will be his last one for the club, or do you reckon we'll keep him? And what do you reckon on him as a player? Because I know lots of fans are getting tired of him. They're thinking he's not good enough, of been scammed. What's your overall thoughts on Jadon Sancho, and do you reckon he'll leave us this summer?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise if United listened to offers for him this summer, but I can't see him leaving because United would want a fair chunk of a fee back for him, and also he's on an absolutely massive wage that he will not find elsewhere. So it would take him to take a quite a significant pay cut to move, and I just don't see that happening given that he's got so long left on his contract. I can understand why fans are getting frustrated because he was that exciting signing that fans were really keen to see. Obviously the form that he had at Borussia Dortmund, the numbers that he put up were really exciting when he moved to United, and it's not really been replicated yet. I think it's difficult to judge last season because clearly he had issues and problems off the field that needed to be addressed. I think really he needs to show next season that he is reaching his potential because these players, United can't afford to just stick with these players indefinitely. You can't have a situation where a player is underperforming season after season and is just guaranteed to be back in the squad. So I would expect him to stay at United this summer, but I think it's a really, really important season for him next season. If we were still talking this time next year about Jadon Sancho underperforming and not being good enough and not putting in the performances of the required quality, I think possibly then you might see more noise around him leaving.
Yeah. I just have one or two final questions. Is my audio all right before I move on?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, great. Because I was lagging on my laptop, so I'm on my phone. Fred and McTominay, supposedly Fulham are interested in Fred. Doesn't mean obviously they're going to sign him. And McTominay, could we see a departure of one of those two in the summer, or do you reckon Ten Hag will have them for another season?
Well, I can certainly see one of them leaving if they sign a midfielder. There is interest in Fred from Fulham and a few clubs in Europe. There's been interest in the past in McTominay from Newcastle, although they didn't really want to meet United's evaluation at the time in January. I think if United were to sign Mason Mount, certainly I could see Fred leaving. Fred, in terms of his contract situation, I think United have kind of shown what they feel Fred's future is because they triggered that 1 year extension that keeps him at the club until 2024. But when they were having talks with players about longer term contracts, the likes of Shaw and Dalot, and now Rashford, they weren't speaking to Fred, and that really says everything about the place that they see him in the squad. The message at the time was that Fred had, probably 18 months to show Ten Hag that he deserves a new contract. I think the fact that United are making such a big push to sign Mason Mount would suggest that Ten Hag feels that they need to move on from him and that Fred will be allowed to leave. Again, though, United aren't historically very good sellers. So, if a club came in and said 20 million, I'm sure that United would bite the hand off. But I very, very much doubt that will happen. It will be about United assessing the offers that are on the table for him and deciding whether they want to cash in or not. I think it's quite important that United sell quite a few of those fringe players: Fred, Bailly, Alex Tellez. If David stays, then Dean Henderson probably has to go. You need to start bringing in some money for those players, even if it's not the money that you first expected. Just make sure that you do a deal, get the wages off the books, bring in a little bit of a transfer fee, add it to the transfer budget for the summer, and try and reinvest. Because what you can't have next season again is a situation where you've got a really, really bloated squad where perhaps you keep Fred because you haven't found a buyer, but he's just not playing because you've got Mason Mount, you've got Eriksen, you've got Casemiro, you've got Fernandes. Fred is nowhere near the team, but he's still sat there on a year's wages of upwards of £200,000 a week and then leaving for free in the summer. It's far better to sell him this year.
Yeah. And I know you and Tom spoke about Mason Mount there, but supposedly Chelsea want to have face-to-face because we put in a bid the other day and it was rejected. Do you reckon that we could still get Mason Mount, or do you reckon we'll walk away? if this face-to-face meeting doesn't go as well as some would hope.
No, I mean, from United's end, that final bid of 55 million is still on the table. So it's up to Chelsea to decide whether they want to take that or not. I said before that transfers are really, really complicated. But when you've got a situation where a club wants to buy, the selling club are willing to sell, and the player wants to move, if those three parties are all in the same boat, you tend to find that the deal gets done. Clearly, there's some kind of impasse at the moment about valuation, about Chelsea's valuation of Mount. They've already come down a little bit. They came down with their valuations of Kai Havertz before he went to Arsenal, of Kovacic before he went to City. So United will hope that eventually some kind of compromise will be reached. I think at the moment, United feel that their latest bid is fair for a player who's got 1 year left on his contract. I think United are probably going to have to up that a little bit to get the deal over the line, because I don't think Chelsea are going to come back and say, oh, that the bid that we rejected, by the way, we're actually going to take it now. But when you've got a club who want to sell, a club who wants to buy, and a player who wants to move, I think that's a pretty good start to get a deal done. It's just about finding some kind of compromise with that fee. I think the gap at the moment is around about 10 million. So it's not a huge gap in terms of these transfers to try and bridge. But again, until a compromise is found on fee, that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, like, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan of Mount, but if Ten Hag wants him, I'll back him. But Tom, any final questions before we end the show?
No, to be honest, I think I've asked everything I had to say, to be honest, so I have nothing more.
What do you reckon? I think you covered everything for now. But Rob, thanks for coming on. Really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a very good show. We literally talked about everything. So don't worry, I'm sure we took all the energy out of Rob. And Tom, thanks for coming on. Michael had to go because his internet was acting up. But Tom, thanks for coming on. Much appreciated as well.
How about that?
And Rob, where can people find you on socials or whatever?
Rob Dawson, ESPN on Twitter, and the same on Instagram and Facebook if you're interested.
Perfect. The links to Rob's socials are in the description anyway, so if you want to check them out, there we go. But as I said, Rob, thanks for coming on. We hope to have you on again in the future. And to anyone watching, we appreciate it. Like, comment, hit that subscribe button, and I'll be back tomorrow discussing more news about Manchester United. Speak to you all in a bit. Have a good one.